gather because we are a loving community. We gather because it is important to let the world know that violence, racism, bigotry, and hate are not welcome here in Montgomery County.
The peace that comes with having the resources so that every person can live a life of dignity. The peace that comes with honest, academic teaching of race relations in this country so that your peace would reign. We invoke your holy presence now, that you will be with us in this vigil and always. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Subhanallah, all praise goes to God. We hope it's not going to happen again, but unfortunately it's going to happen again. We're going to pray, but we have to pay. Let's then all together pray and pay, meaning pray that it's not going to happen, but pay by doing everything we can in our power to make sure this type of violence stop. Since we were born in our culture, in our religions, we've been taught to love one another, that we all the same. All scriptures brought it. In the Quran, which is the scripture that the Prophet Muhammad brought through Allah, Allah is saying, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu inna akramakum 'inda Allahi atqakum inna Allaha 'alimun khabir. He's saying, you people, God made you men and women, and then he made of you groups, and he makes of you tribes, communities, regions, countries. Once we're different, if we don't know each other, we don't go to each other's places, we look at each other like one.
For the loss of the victims and victims' family in Buffalo, New York, as well as the lives impacted by this tragic event in Southern California, in our Asian American communities. And let me offer my brief prayer from the Buddhist scripture, the Discourse on Loving Kindness, or Kalaniya Metta Sutta. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none, through anger or ill will, wish harm upon another. Like a mother protects her only child with her life, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating loving kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the heavens, downwards to the earth, free from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or laying down, free from mental idleness. We should be the gods abiding, and we should sustain this recollection, and this is the very abiding of the gods, by not holding on the fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being free from all sensual desire, and is not be reborn again in this world. And thank you so much for your attention.
I watched the war in Vietnam and the civil rights movement, and I learned about imperialism and what was done by the Western world to the Third World. So it's kind of hard to look at all that and say, oh, this is a model culture. This is the way we should conduct ourselves in the world. So I'm not confused about who we are. Everybody has faults and everybody has flaws. We do a lot of things right. We do some things awfully wrong. And we're here today because we're talking about some of the things that we do awfully wrong. It is really sad on a beautiful day like this that we have to gather again. The bloodshed in Buffalo we saw, I think, shook many people to the core. I cannot imagine what it must be like after this and after all the other incidents. This is hardly the first. For people to have to worry about how far somebody will drive to go and kill them. That is amazing to me, that we've devolved to that point. And, we've been getting there a while. The thing of Emmett Till, the 4 little girls in Birmingham, the assassinations of Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. We've seen that violence targeted against Black Americans over and over again. I think about the images from the burning of Tulsa, when one village decided they would burn somebody else's village. All these things are part of American history. Uncomfortable parts of American history, but real parts of American history. I feel, and I thought for a long time, that racism has been normalized in this culture. It's treated like another point of view, as if you can be a racist and not a racist. These are 2 points of view. Who am I to say? Well, if we don't say that one is right and one is wrong, and don't say that really clearly, this is going to continue to be perpetuated. And, I think about growing up in Montgomery County, and I went to Montgomery Hills Junior High School, and I'm sitting in a class, my civics class, I guess 1962, and we're having a pro and con debate on civil rights because that is the hot topic of the day, other than Vietnam. And we had this debate, and then on the pro side of civil rights were all the logical arguments. But on the con side was somebody being able to get up in front of a class and say, Black people represent a subhuman species, they are children and need to be taken care of. And no comment from the teacher, as if this was just another point of view which we would have a casual debate about. I think how that affected my classmates, because that reinforced in some of my classmates the beliefs they were bringing into their classroom from home. And some of us were horrified. But at no point did the adults in the room step up and say, this is not appropriate, it's not right, and this is no way to talk about other human beings. And so I will say pretty clearly, I was affected by all that growing up, and it continues to guide how I look at things. And I feel that, we're the adults in the room. Somewhere along the way, we've got to develop the courage, not just to talk about a better world and peace and understanding, but be willing to confront people who spew hate and say this is wrong and this is not acceptable. Our children and our children's children have to get an absolutely clear message that this is not the way this society is going to evolve. This is not how we're going to survive with each other. And we need to be firm about that. It's a role that we have to take in our civic spaces. It's a role we have to take in all of our institutions, religious institutions, and it's a role we have to take in all our community institutions. Our voices can be powerful. Many of you are respected leaders in your communities. Talking about this forthright and open, owning American history, whether you call it critical race theory or not, all it is the factual history of this country. Owning that is important if we're ever going to get beyond this moment. Buffalo was so alarming just because reading the description of this kid targeting a place based on the population and the certainty he could kill as many Black people as possible is just, beyond the pale. This county's seen an increase in bias incidents. We're aware of that. This county has a no tolerance policy, and our state's attorney's office will aggressively get engaged in trying to find people who engage in hateful acts. We are not going to be passive about this. We are going to be strong about making sure that people are protected. We encourage people to speak up. Now, there are some in the community who won't speak up. They either feel they won't be listened to, they won't be trusted, or they fear retaliation. No one should fear retaliation from a government that is here to protect you. And people should feel free to come forward and tell us what they're concerned with. In this budget and at the end of the current fiscal cycle we're in, the county council and myself put money into protecting institutions, faith institutions, nonprofit institutions that are often targets of hate. We want to make sure that we have to do what we need to do to keep people safe. But I think we'd all agree, if we were in calmer times, that 800,000 this year, the 700,000 last year, how many school psychologists could we have hired? How many, gyms could I have kept open? How many hours of recreation could we have provided? Everything we have to do to fight this is taking away resources from things that we could be building with. I would rather be building than fighting, but we're going to fight if we have to, if that's what it takes for us to do the right thing and create a more just climate in this county. Montgomery County's Hate Violence Committee promotes educational activities that help people learn the positive value of ethnic and social diversity. I can't think of the negative value. So it's just the value. They also advise the council and our office on policies that can keep our community safe from hateful attacks. And there's a section on the county website where you can learn to identify hate crimes and what they are under state law and what to do if you believe you've experienced one or you've witnessed one. And I know far too many people in this community have experienced that. I've got grandchildren who are African American. I know how they feel and what their sense of safety is, and I know that their sense of safety, or their father's sense of safety, over time has declined. We were, it wasn't that long ago, we thought we had gotten ourselves beyond this. We had passed major legislation. We were on a track to a better place. And to be sitting here in 2022 and talking about we have declined, that is absolutely unacceptable. So we don't want anybody to feel unsafe doing everyday things. We cannot allow this kind of terror to be tolerated. This is terrorism. This is the very definition of terrorism, when you attack a civilian population and try to inflict as much pain and suffering on that civilian population that they fold, disappear, or otherwise lose support. We can't allow that to happen in America. There's also no good excuse for these crimes. This replacement theory is pure garbage. There is no other word for it. There is another word for it. I won't use it in here. It is just absolutely insane. Nobody's replacing anybody. This is not about replacement. This is about joining into the American dream, not replacing anybody in the American dream. And the same way they demonize critical race theory, whose major fault is what? They tell us what happened. I mean, if white people feel guilty about what happened in the past, so what? Maybe people ought to think about this. I'll close by telling a really quick story. One of my very best friends, his wife, were here, and they visited. And the last day they were here, they went to the Josiah Henson Museum. This was just a normal trip, she thought. And she reads the last name, this guy, Bryce Letton, or Litton, I think it says in the museum. And her last name was Letton. And when she went home to San Francisco, she looked at the family Bible and realized that Bryce Letton, who was the slave overseer and the one that inflicted all that pain on Josiah Henson, was a distant uncle of hers. And she had no idea. She has been upset now for days, realizing that her family played a role in this, and she didn't know anything about it. That's how deep this is and how deeply entangled all the roots of it are. So I thank you all for being here today. This is important, what we do. It's important what we say, and I hope we carry that forward every day. Thank you.
Who have once again come together in solidarity to show their love and support and respect for one another and all of our residents here in Montgomery County. I want to thank my colleagues on the council that are here with us today, Councilmember Andrew Friedson, Councilmember Sidney Katz, all of my colleagues who, through me today, want to express our deepest condolences to the 10 families whose lives were shattered just over a week ago. Families that included a father on his way to buy a birthday cake for the birthday of his 3-year-old son, a retired police officer who selflessly sacrificed his own life as a security guard to try and defend those around him, and the countless hundreds of thousands of people around this country, including me, who were once again startled, awakened, scared, with what has become an all too common pattern, made up of awful ingredients: fear, hatred, anger, ignorance, and yet once again, the ability to be able to purchase a firearm that has no reasonable business in any community at any time. We are here today once again to reaffirm the Montgomery Way. And in the Montgomery Way, we acknowledge that we believe we are, in fact, our brother's keeper. In the Montgomery Way, we acknowledge that we do try our best to live by the golden rule, to treat others as we would have treated ourselves. In the Montgomery Way, we recognize that we are so much stronger united than divided. We choose peace. We choose love. We choose respect for one another. And we certainly may not be perfect. But as evidenced today with these remarkable faith leaders from across our community, we once again reaffirm that we understand we are led by humanity. And regardless of what God we may or may not pray to, what unites us as a community is that humanity. It's impossible to make sense of the senseless. And sometimes I know it's very difficult, as it is right now, to find light in such awful darkness. But we cannot give up. We cannot be tired. We must continue to resolve to come together as a community. We have to take practical steps through our policies and our action, such as what the council did last year in banning the sale of ghost guns, and our General Assembly reaffirmed across our state. We have to take practical steps, as the county executive mentioned, and provide the resources necessary for our places of worship and places of gathering that disproportionately we see with too many of these incidences impact our Jewish community, our Black and brown community, our immigrant community in a way that is terrifying, but that also follows, unfortunately, a tradition in this country that goes back since its founding. That ignorance that people are afraid, as the county executive said, someone may replace them. Nobody's replacing anybody. We are on the same team. We are part of the same family. We breathe the same air. We drink the same water. We bleed the same way. So we also have to take practical measures to support our youth. Because I've been in the youth development space for 20 years, and I can tell you that the fear and the anxiety and the emotional distress that the last 2 years have taken on our youth are truly extraordinary. The programs and services that they have grown to count on, the caring adults that have been so important to their development and their life, were not there for them for 1.5 years, or in some cases longer. We've got some work to do. We've got some ground to make up. We're going to make up that ground. We are going to do that work because we have to, and because it's the right thing to do. I want to acknowledge Councilmember Will Jawando, who has just come forward as well. And I'll end with this. Councilmember Jawando helped lead an effort supported by all of my colleagues that recognized racism is a public health crisis. And it has to be tackled in that vein, which means that every single one of us has a responsibility. And while all of us can't do everything, each of us can do something. I, as the president of the council and as a member of this body, but more importantly, as a human being on this earth, am committed to doing everything I can to weed out this anger, to weed out this hate, to prevent it from happening in the future. I want to thank everybody for coming together today. I actually am optimistic, despite the horror and all of the tragedy that we have seen, that we live in the possible. And when I look out into this beautiful church and into this wonderful congregation, I see Montgomery County. I see what's possible. So thank you all so much for coming together today to once again reaffirm the love and the respect that we need to have for each other every day, every moment, every year. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
It is outrageous that we must once again gather in this holy place to express our collective sadness and outrage at yet another massacre, this one targeting innocent African Americans food shopping in Buffalo. The Jewish sage Hillel said, "Whoever kills a soul kills a world." And how true that is, because for the family and friends of those murdered, their lives will never, ever be the same. On behalf of Montgomery County's Jewish community, I want to say to our African American family and friends that we stand with you in solidarity and say loudly and publicly, we share your pain, we are here for you, and we always will be. What motivates a well-armed individual to commit atrocities against fellow citizens? The answer: pure, mindless, groundless hatred. The world has always had unsurpassed admiration for our nation's values, but these values are under assault by hatred permeating throughout our society today. What happened in Buffalo was predictable. When you mix mental illness, available weaponry, hatred, and social media, you end up with self-radicalized individuals ready to commit acts of violence. And unless there is immediate transformative change, another massacre will take place. Our nation's leaders must return to civil discourse. Hatred must be unequivocally condemned across the political spectrum. Assault weapons must be banned. Access to mental health resources must be increased. Law enforcement must be given additional tools to monitor radicalized individuals, and more preemptive programs must be put in place to stop the violence before it happens. Localities around the nation need to have the vision and courage of our county executive, Marc Elrich, and our county council to create a grant program that helps congregations hire off-duty police to protect themselves. If and when resources become available, this program must be expanded. But as the county executive said, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't need any of this money at all? We know police officers deter would-be attackers, and our nation must follow Montgomery County's lead. History has taught us that when hatred doesn't stop with one group, but it spreads like a virus throughout society, weakening our foundation. We are fortunate to live in a wonderful county, a beautiful, diverse mosaic where we share and respect each other and love each other. But those of us here today have a sacred responsibility to be the vanguard against hatred in our community. Today we must remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King: hate begets hate. We all know this. Hate begets hate. Violence begets violence. Toughness begets greater toughness, and we must meet the forces of hate with the power of love. May God bless our community and provide comfort to our African American brethren during this time, and may this be the last time ever that we must come together as a community under these circumstances. Thank you.
Our mission is to work to eliminate discrimination, prejudice, intolerance, and bigotry, and to promote goodwill, cooperation, understanding, human relations among all residents of Montgomery County. As we gather here today in the wake of the terrible events in Buffalo and other recent tragic events of racial and ethnic hatred and violence, we have to confront an uncomfortable truth. This uncomfortable truth was articulated by Robert Samuels, co-author of the recently published book, His Name is George Floyd. This is the unvarnished, uncomfortable truth that we must soberly and urgently face. Racism is a pervasive, insidious force threatening to corrupt the spirit of every American if it is not acknowledged and confronted. Racism is immoral and has again and again led to deadly violence toward our fellow human beings. It is also a dysfunctional force in our body politic. It has been used to divide those of us who should be allies. Although we here in Montgomery County live in a community that thankfully has been spared much of the recent racial, ethnic, and religious violence that has afflicted other communities, we must not delude ourselves that racial, ethnic, and religious hate is non-existent in Montgomery County. We must be vigilant as a community because to survive, we have no other choice but to confront and face racial, ethnic, and religious injustice. We cannot simply hope for a solution. We need to get to work to confront and destroy this evil. Thank you.
Before reporting on his book as reviewed in the Washington Post this past Sunday, co-author Robert Samuels considered systemic racism to be an unmoving dark cloud that hangs over all of us. As he watched life unfurl for the families he researched, he came to understand and find that the residue of America's original sin was something more terrifying. Racism is a pervasive, insidious force threatening to corrupt the spirit of every American if it is not acknowledged and confronted. Montgomery County NAACP joins leadership here today in sending our support in regard to the communities of Buffalo. Thank you.
My name is Reverend James Boney, and I am the president of the Black Ministers Conference of Montgomery County. We are an alliance of predominantly black churches within the county where we promote not only the religious aspects of our county, but also justice, equality, human rights across our community. And we have come to this place today to stand with you, not only to say that we're standing with the community in Buffalo, but we've come to say that we are the community in Buffalo. The young man charged, Patton, Gendrum, was filled with such racial hatred that he traveled 200 miles to Buffalo to find black people in order to kill. He could have ended up in any community where hatred had been sowed against that community. And the question that I believe we need to deal with is what filled this young man with such racial hatred? The Bible is clear about this, that every action starts with a seed of hatred, a seed of discrimination, a seed of racism that has been sown. And County Executive mentioned sitting in his civics class, hearing a comment that affected him. And so there are seeds being sown all over that are affecting the people. And we've seen over these past years that people who sit in high levels of our nation are sowing seeds of hatred against black and brown people of color in our country, against our Asian people in the country, against our Muslim people in the country, against our Jewish community, against the Spanish and the immigrants in our country. And the things that they don't seem to realize is that these seeds will take root, and these seeds will grow, and they will produce a harvest. And what we saw in Buffalo really is just one instance of a harvest that came out of some seed that was planted somewhere along the line. And as a result, 10 innocent people that were simply shopping in the grocery store, lives came to a tragic end. So my brothers and my sisters, I don't know what the answer is, but I do believe we need to come together. And we need to find ways to fight this battle from the source. We need to find ways to stop people from sowing these seeds of hatred that are generating a new generation of haters in our nation. We need to find ways to find people accountable. When you sow a seed of hatred intentionally, and it ends in some violent act against our community, what accountability is there for you? We need to find ways to stop these websites that are on our internet that are spreading hate throughout our nations. We need to start talking to our children about race truth, not theory. Because theory is what you believe happened. But we need to talk to our children about truth, what did happen. Because our children need truth. And the Holy Bible tells us that truth will set us free. And we need to, across all of our communities and cultures, support those organizations like the NAACP that we have in the Black community that is on the front line fighting these battles. Within our cultures, we need to support those organizations that are out there on the front line so they can fight their battles. And as the faith community, we need to come together under God. We need to unite because Dr. Martin Luther King showed us that when people of God come together, we can make a difference. Thank you.
I stand here before you today as a second-generation Taiwanese American, as a Rockville resident, born in Gaithersburg, and as a member of USN Institute, part of the Buddhist community in Montgomery County. Thank you for inviting me to share in this space of interfaith healing and solidarity. I'm not here today to remind this audience that the local and global communities we come from are no stranger to political and economic violence. I don't need to remind you that these United States, like countless nations then and since then, were forged through acts of genocide, erasure, and oppression that continue to perpetuate harm to this day. But I am here to say and assert to anyone listening who thinks that these modern day atrocities will stop us, well, the truth is, we are all living proof of war and violence, but we know we are even greater living proof of love and sacrifice. The events of the prior weekend were not the first, and very well may not be the last, but let it be known that the acts of sacrifice that weekend by retired police officer Aaron Salter Jr. and sports medicine doctor John Chang will forever be heard around the world, louder than any cowardly act of ignorance, hate, or oppression. So allow me to leave here today with these words in solidarity. We are here, we belong here, and we will continue to prove that love always has and always will prevail. Thank you.
Let's now put some real meat to that readiness. Let us share with you, Montgomery County, about that readiness. And I'm pleased to have these persons come forward. Assistant Chief Carmen Fasialo, who is our Deputy Chief Assistant Chief, I should say, for Montgomery County Police Department's new Community Resource Bureau. I think I've got that right, Chief. Also coming up would be Richard Allen, who is with our Montgomery County Committee Against Hate Violence, the Reverend Timothy Warner, who is pastor at Emery Grove United Methodist Church, and then my colleague and co-worker James McClellan, who is with Montgomery County's Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security.
I'm honored to be a part of this community as we work to create a safer, stronger, and more just society for all. We have come together here in the wake of terrorist attacks in Buffalo, New York, and Southern California that claimed the lives of 11 people and harmed so many more. These were attacks fueled by a narrow ideology and heinous philosophy built on anger and extremism. And these were emblematic of a public health epidemic that has impacted our country far too much and far too often. Over the last few years, we have seen too many acts of hate in communities across the United States. Devastating shootings targeting Hispanic people in El Paso, Texas, the deadliest assault on Jewish people in U.S. history at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a massacre at the Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, and a violent rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. The attacks we have suffered in the name of hateful white supremacist ideology are too many to name, and their impacts are too great to bear. The victims of this hate and of the violence it sets in motion are our friends, our neighbors, and our community members. They are, as Robert Kennedy once said, human beings whom other human beings loved and needed. The reality is that these vicious attacks have destructive consequences far beyond the borders of our towns and states in which they occur. Each instance makes us more anxious about our well-being and more suspicious of our neighbors. It diminishes our country and restricts the richness of our experience. And it instills fear in those people who need love the most, adults and children alike, who see themselves in the population targeted by these heinous attacks, who worry about their own acceptance and fear their own safety, who wonder if they will be targeted simply because of who they are. I want to make clear that the narrow, hateful ideology that fueled the terrorist attacks in both Buffalo and Southern California have no place in our country or in our community here in Montgomery County. And I want to convey a message to every person who has ever felt alone or unseen, targeted by hate or diminished by bigotry. We stand with you. No matter your race or ethnicity, we stand with you. No matter whether you worship, we stand with you. No matter who you are, what you look like, or who you love, we stand with you. We stand with our diverse, extraordinary community and the people who live, work, and exist within our borders. This is not simply a promise. It's an ongoing effort. At the Montgomery County Police Department, we are taking action to push back against extremism and to support all those who feel its impact. As part of our community policing efforts, we have a team that investigates every hate or bias incident and follows through with vital services for the individuals who are targeted, impacted, or made to feel unsafe. And as County Executive Elrich mentioned earlier, this year he and Police Chief Jones, along with the County Council, announced grants to houses of worship and nonprofits designed to provide additional security to protect against these attacks. These efforts are critical. They will fortify the safety of our friends, neighbors, and family members against peddlers of hate and perpetrators of violence. They will ensure that more loved ones return home safe and sound, and they will help more people receive the support they need. But they are not enough. We must do more. We need to bolster gun laws to make it more difficult for violent people to cause harm. We need to speak truth to power, to put this issue at the forefront of conversations and on the desks of those with the ability to make change. And we need to recognize that thoughts and prayers are just not enough without the will to spur action and the determination to achieve results. I pledge to you that I will do my part, and I promise to you that the Montgomery County Police Department will do ours. But we need your help as well to support this work, to partner with us in our efforts, and most importantly, to respond to these attacks by standing up in our diverse community. We need to redouble our commitment to inclusivity, compassion, and open-mindedness. We need to renew our dedication to kindness and support. We need not only to prevent these hateful attacks in the future, but to extinguish the ideology that spurs them. When we allow hate to take root, when we look the other way or decide it's not our concern or not our fight, then we are putting our friends, our neighbors, and our loved ones in harm's way. But when we stand up for one another and support our neighbors of every background and circumstance, we help to create a protective bond that cannot be broken. Ultimately, that is the most important thing that we can do together, to insist that hate has no place here, and to make clear that targeted communities are not only safe with us, but accepted and celebrated for who they are. That's why I'm so proud to be here with all of you today, public servants and activists, friends and neighbors, who are committed to building a better, stronger community together. Thank you once again for having me today. Thank you for your devotion to your community and to each other. And I look forward to working with you all in the days, weeks, and months to come. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, my name is Richard William Allen. I'm a newer member of the Montgomery County Committee Against Hate Violence, more newly appointed. And I'm going to read a statement on behalf of our chairperson, who's Ms. Lisa Jones, who's unable to be here with us today. Our mission is to eradicate acts of hate and intimidation through community education, advocacy, collaboration, and legislation with a view towards promoting activities that demonstrate the positive value of ethical and social diversity within our community. We stand with the Buffalo community and all communities who have sustained loss as a result of hate and violence. And as we stand, we encourage and remind our community and the nation's leaders of the importance of not just standing up with our rhetoric, but also with our actions. Each new hate violence incident, while devastating and unconscionable, is an invitation to make change. It's an invitation for us to take moral inventory of our community and right the wrongs of the past and to implement corrective action for the present and the future. It is and has been our turn to transform stumbling blocks into stepping stones. I thank everybody who came here today to be a part of this process. Do not give up. The fight for justice is right. We cannot assume anything. We cannot assume we know it all, but we got to keep struggling for what's right. Thank you very much.
I'm disappointed to have to be able to stand in front of a room like this yet another time. I feel as a leader in this county that I have a wound that despite everything I can do, just won't be allowed to heal. Every time something like this happens, sometimes in the Muslim community, sometimes in the LGBTQ community, sometimes in the Black community, sometimes in the Jewish community. The healing that would have happened, someone just rips the scab back off. And we feel it more intensely every single time. I spent last week watching funerals of 10 families who, like mine recently, I just lost my brother, have to go through that agonizing, empty feeling of losing somebody who you love and depend on and who you've lived with and been in community with. And I thought about it in this case, and I thought about the question, why? Where was the sense in it? Why was it necessary? And I began to think about these realities. Peyton Gendron grew up in a community of about 5,000 people. The trend there is that people are moving away from that community, not moving to it. They are 96% white, with whites, with blacks and Latinos being a very distant 1% apiece demographically in that community. And I compared it to a place like this where we live, 1.3 million people. Majority minority here. There are more black and brown folks here than there are white people in this community. A place where everywhere you go in Montgomery County, to some extent it looks like the United Nations. And I think about whether or not Peyton Gendron could have sat in his basement in Montgomery County, or wherever it is he was, bored during COVID, and gone down the rabbit hole of hate to learn about replacement theory. And unfortunately, the answer is yes. It could happen here. Here's the wound. In 2003, I went to pastor in Boyd's, Maryland, but by 2005, some sick white, I assume, brother came to paint a swastika on the door of my little African-American church and on the Negro school down the street and at another church nearby for reasons completely unprovoked as far as I knew. Happened again in the Muslim community in Gaithersburg where I sat with the imam there, with others in our community to decry violence and acts of hate against that community. I stood in front of thousands when the Pittsburgh massacre happened because people in this community gathered together to decry hate. The Montgomery Way is different, and yet it could happen here. Yesterday at our church, we had a huge community gathering, maybe something that was approaching the scale of the great camp meetings that used to happen there, where thousands of African Americans from the Mid-Atlantic would gather to worship and to pray and to fellowship. And as I thought about it, I looked around at the two government buildings that are adjacent to our church. And you start thinking this way when your wound hasn't healed. Could somebody go up on one of the rooftops of one of those buildings and from 50 yards away, pick off people under one of the two tents that were on our property? It would be mother's milk. It would be so easy for that to happen. And it could happen everywhere in this county. You don't drive from somewhere to find black people in Montgomery County. You don't have to drive far to find Latino people in Montgomery County. You don't have to go far to find Muslims or Jews or anybody to hate. We are all out here everywhere, every day. Please know that it could happen here. But here's the Montgomery County way. We, as a faith community, people who love God, however we understand God, must live together in such a way where everybody's safety under God is a guarantee in this county. We, as the people of God, must come together always and live in such a way where it is difficult for people who are hateful and vengeful to be. You shouldn't be able to hide behind replacement theory in Montgomery County anyway. Not because we are so vigilant, we ought to be, but because we are purveying so much love in the county that has no place to live. Where there is love, there is light. And light dispels darkness still. So So I want us to get about the business of loving. We've heard lots of things. I'm thankful for the government, for the things that they've done. We've heard from council, we've heard from the county executive about funds that have been allocated to help us feel safer and more vigilant and more secure. But the one thing that will make us most secure is that we get about the business of loving one another. I'll make this one last comment and then I'll sit down. If it weren't so evil, I would laugh at replacement theory. Our goal as a people, as God's people, ought not be to replace anyone. Our goal ought to be to invite everyone. But I would like to replace the sense of power of any white supremacist. If we want to do something to protect ourselves, let's get about the business of replacing people's false sense of power that pervades evil everywhere around us. Let's just live no, let's say no, let's do no by loving one another. Thank you.
First, I want to offer my personal condolences to the people of Buffalo and to all who have been hurt by the hateful and cowardly attack that occurred last weekend. My heart is broken, and I know that God's heart is broken too. Montgomery County has a strong commitment to protecting its residents and visitors. A part of that commitment is helping our houses of worship to become safe havens. When we enter our church, synagogue, mosque, or temple, we should not have to worry about our personal safety, but unfortunately that's not always the case. I'm also sure that the shoppers who entered Tops Market in Buffalo on May 14th felt that they were entering a safe place too. The Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security has, for a number of years now, partnered with Montgomery County Police, the county's Fire and Rescue Service, and the county executive's Faith Community Advisory Group to host presentations on securing our houses of worship. During these presentations, we instruct faith leaders on how to minimize the risk of violent intruders and how to respond in the event of an attack. The strategies that are presented can also be used anywhere that might come under attack, including office environments, entertainment venues, and retail establishments such as the Tops Market. If anything positive came out of last weekend, it's that in the Buffalo shooting and the attack the following day on Geneva Presbyterian Church in California, many of the strategies and actions that we present were employed. And although the number of casualties was definitely far too high, it could very well have been much higher. We've scheduled our first post-pandemic Securing Our Houses of Worship presentation for Tuesday, June 7th at 7 p.m. We strongly urge faith leaders to attend this presentation or one of our future ones. We want to help you make your houses of worship what they should be, a place where people can safely gather to worship. Thank you.
We pledge to promote hope, respect, acceptance, and opportunity in a safe environment for all of our residents. To come together from various life experiences, faith beliefs, and diverse cultural and ethnic and racial backgrounds to uplift our common humanity. To come together to support all efforts with specific goals and intent toward peace, justice, and unity. And to speak out against all efforts, both far and near, that seek to foster the destructive elements of racism, hatred, division, intimidation, violence, and fear. To come together and convene courageous, frank conversations on issues and concerns that are important to our community, seeking truth and pathways toward reconciliation. To respectfully listen to ideas and perspectives that may differ from our own. To seek out opportunities to participate
and actively engage in educational and peaceful activities focusing on understanding, acceptance, mutual respect, and unity among all of us who make up our neighborhoods, our communities, our towns, our villages, our cities, our county, our people. This is the Montgomery County Way. Thank you very much.
To me, to my family, to my community, to my race, to us as a people, because we have to understand what it is that we're dealing with, and we have to call it out for what it is, and we have to be real about it. I actually took a class at the University of Maryland. It was called The History of Terrorism. And they went through a number of different iterations of how terrorism has spawned across the globe in so many different kinds of facets, all designed to intimidate and to keep down a particular group of people. I want to read to you the definition of domestic terrorism. Domestic terrorism, or homegrown terrorism, is a form of terrorism in which victims within a country are targeted by a perpetrator with the same citizenship as the victims. Now, I don't know about y'all, but that certainly sounds like domestic terrorism to me. And so when we look at what happened in Buffalo, we have to be real and understand that we need to call it out for what it is. We have people that are terrorizing our black community. We have people that are terrorizing our communities of certain faiths. We have people who are terrorizing people who look different from them, or because they choose to love a person who may not be the same person that they choose to love. We have people who are terrorizing people because they are different, trying to break us apart and separate us. But I tell you today, we will not let them win. The key in this is that we need to lead, as you heard Reverend Warner say, with the importance of loving one another. Ephesians 4:31 says, "Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice." That is what we need to be teaching our children. We need to be raising up. We need to be talking about this in our community. Because every single time that one of these incidents happens, they hope that one of us will fall off, that this room won't look like this room. And I promise you that across this nation, unfortunately, we are blessed. We are blessed to be able to have people of all faith coming together. We are blessed to have all races coming together. We are blessed to have all forms of sexual orientation coming together. But guess what, folks? That is not happening across this country. This type of meeting is not happening across this country, and this conversation is certainly not happening across this country. We need to change that. I heard yesterday, and I'll close with this. I heard yesterday a woman who was speaking at the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee and talked about how she had told her daughter that she was growing up in a world where she didn't have to worry about racism and hate. And she said she had to admit that she lied to her daughter. I had the same thing, folks. I had my daughters come to me and tell me, "Daddy, we don't see color. Things are great. I have friends that look like the United Nations. Everybody loves everybody, and we all get along. We all support each other. We support each other regardless of who we are, who we love, what we do. It doesn't matter." Unfortunately, folks, my daughters don't say that anymore, because that's not what they experience. As they got older, as they saw the rise of the hatred that we saw under an administration that preached and supported divisiveness and hatred and vitriol, they saw what happened as a result. They saw us go backwards. They saw and experienced the same things that I saw and experienced growing up here in Montgomery County, the same things that my mother saw and experienced in rural South Carolina back during the civil rights struggle. We have gone backwards. In fact, some cases we have gotten worse than we were back then. When I talked to my mother about what it is that's going on now, she said at least people had some sense. They don't even have that anymore because people don't care, because people don't love. We have got to get love back. We have got to make sure that we're telling every one of our family members, our friends, anyone who will listen to us in the grocery store or in the bus, we've got to speak out. We've got to speak out and make sure that people understand just how important it is. Because I will tell you, if we don't, we will lose. We will lose this great nation, we will lose the great strides that we've made, and we will lose a generation. That is what is at stake. And so I challenge each of you, please, showing up here is great. We're all in this together, but we've got to do more. We've got to reach out and make sure that we're having these conversations with people who we know don't believe what we believe. I was in the gym this morning telling a person who was at the January 6th insurrection about why it is that they need to change their heart. I challenge you to do the same in your own respect. Thank you, and God bless you.
You know, what will we do when the hugs go away? When the 8-year-old little girl who was hiding in a freezer at that Tops grocery store, what are we going to do for her in Buffalo? What are we going to do for the children here in our community when people stop talking about this latest instance of hate? And I so appreciated Reverend Warner talking about that this could happen here. I think we often operate in a what I'll call an aspirational bubble here in Montgomery County, where because we care for one another, we want things to be different. And there's a danger there in becoming complacent and blinded to things that are right in front of us. And you know, my colleague, Councilmember Albornoz, I want to appreciate him as our council president, and my colleagues who are here as well, and all of us mentioned the action we took to declare racism a public health emergency. Because as I said then, and I'll say now, we die in many ways due to racism. And while the mass violence and the horrific shooting that is this latest act in Buffalo is an example of one of the many ways we die disproportionately at the hands of gun violence in this country as Black people, we die in many other ways. I'm just as upset about the racism that allows Black women to die 3 times the rate in childbirth. I'm just as upset about the racism that allowed a grocery store, that one in Buffalo, to be the only one within 4 miles, that took 20 years or more to put in place, and now is shut down, and people are having to rely on open air food markets and corner stores with no understanding of when that grocery store or a grocery store will open. I'm upset about that racism. I'm upset about the racism that I've seen on display in my 40 years in this county, in my 4 years on the council, where I've had people threaten my son's life, 2-year-old Black boy. I've had someone post that who lived in Frederick, investigated by our police department, and I want to thank them for their vigilance, say that they would hope that I was shot at the side of the road while I waited at a stoplight. Specific threat. This hate is pervasive, and it has many forms, but it finds its root at the same, as the fruit of the same poisonous tree of racism in this country, the dehumanization of Black and brown people, the subjugation of Black and brown people to create a system of advantage for some and disadvantage for others. You cannot do what was done in Buffalo unless if you think those folks are human. Deranged or not, replacement or not, you must devalue the lives of those individuals. And I want us all to challenge, to Craig's point, who and how have we devalued others? When we casually say those communities are going to be that way, or those people are going to act like that. The casual, nice racism of Montgomery County. And we're not alone. That scaffolds and accrues over time to build a callousness that infects us all and desensitizes us to this dehumanization. And it exists in so many layers. And I would just ask that we must pray for these families, this community. But what will we do when the hugs go away? Will we commit to the hard work of unearthing these systemic and structural and individual forms of racism in our own minds, in our own communities, and root them out? Yes, take away the tools of mass violence. Yes, gun control and reform. But we must attack the root cause of these issues, which is the devaluation and dehumanization of Black and brown people, which is an American as apple pie. It is the foundation of the country that we live in. We must address it. If we're gonna live the Montgomery County way and get to the commitment that we've made today, which I know we all believe in our hearts, that we will tell the truth, that we will seek reconciliation, but then that we will get about the business of repair. Repair is what we need. God bless you. Thank you.
The massacre that the Sikh community witnessed 10 years ago, 6 lives were taken away, and a police officer stopped the gunman, who was a member of the white supremacist group, and he took 15 bullets on his own body. And guess what? There were 18 women and children who were hiding in a kitchen while the shooting was taking place. So anytime an incident like this takes place, it brings back the memories of our community, which have seen great number of violence and hate and even murders of Sikh individuals. In the last 4 weeks, there have been 5 attacks on Sikhs in Richmond Hill in New York, Queens. So this is not stopping. This was 10 years ago, and the numbers have been increasing. So we are sending our love and words of comfort to the families who have suffered greatly in Buffalo. And I can just share what children of our community has faced. More than 60% of our Sikh children go through bullying and hate in school system because of their turban and unshorn hair. And I can just imagine what the children of the Jewish community, the African American community, or the Asian communities, the brown communities face, and what conversation these families have when they gather together at the dinner table.
Mayor Brown, my name is Gabe, and I am the president of the Montgomery County Council. I am joined today by my colleagues on the council, interfaith leaders in our community, government leaders, and community leaders to profess to you today on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Buffalo, New York,